I'm going to sit here so I can see anybody in the room. First, I would like to thank for the opportunity for being here, and especially to my supervisor, Professor Alfredo García Prats, for his support and guidance during this path of the PhD. Today, I'm going to talk about my PhD topic of my thesis, which is the tax-related illicit financial flows, especially the regulatory and institutional challenges in the context of international taxation, in which basically I started this research due to the tax evasion in its cross-border perspective. Has become one of the most pressing challenges of the modern international taxation system. And so because of the impact that it has in the investment of many countries in the development in their policies and the investment in human rights, such as health, such as education and housing, it's not only about a technical issue of revenue collection, but it's the damage that is being affecting our societies, and how the tendencies have shown that there been like a worriness about tax avoidance that we've been developing during these 2 decades, many sophisticated instruments to fight against the tax avoidance, and how the tax evasion have seemed to be put aside, and how the appearance of the concept tax-related illicit financial flows as a subcategory of the illicit financial flow may appear, at least as I see the topic, as a new opportunity to speak about why do we have this fragmentation system in every single country, considering the tax fraud and tax crimes in every single perspective, depending on the country we are into a domestic law perspective, and how, for example, this problem is and this phenomena has been tried to be reached out by money laundering directives to these tax crimes and the introduction of tax crimes as a possible solution. But on the other hand, we have like this administrative tax administration approach in which we've been developing, exchanging information and cooperation internationally. And it's true that the source of this cooperation starts with trying to fight against what is the double taxation, and we've been creating treaties based on bilateralism. We still have this problem with the tax evasion, in which I think that is one of the problems that is related into this new concept, which is only more or less 10 years old, and also how this being affected domestically and the development normatively in the European Union. So what I'm trying to present today is how I structure my PhD, and which is the main vision about the topic, in which I will present the outcome. I pick the hypothesis, and then why is the relevance in the matter of this topic. And then I will explain kind of a little bit of preliminary conclusions that I have, especially in the tax crimes, which I've been especially working about, and newly and recently I've been working about this new tax law perspective, in which I've structured in these 2 sides my work. So we will have like a first part in when I've been investigating and reaching about the foundations, about where does this illicit financial flow appears, why is the matter of the problem, and how this appear as this subcategory of the illicit financial flow, and why it is included in the Agenda 2030, and how this have an impact in the policies and the development of the policies of our society and states during the past decade. And also, in the second part, I reached to the kind of this preliminary conclusion in which we have like a lack of international consensus about tax evasion, how every single country has their own interpretation of what is tax evasion. We call it the tax crimes, and how do we normally, and it's what I've observed, we lean on the quantity and the amount of the as a criteria for establishing the tax crimes. Then how do we can answer to this gap that we have in this consensus about the tax evasion, and how the criminal law has been one of the intentions of the legislator, not only domestically but at the international level, in order to approach to these flows. And as like the other parts of the PhD, we will have like this administrative approach in which I've divided it as well into the cooperation and enforcement, especially highlighting the joint audits, in which this is like a new application of the Tax 7, new introduction, in which I think we have opportunity to have like an instrument real powerful to fight against this tax illicit financial flow. And also, what can we do about this tax illicit financial flow? My intention is to build a functional concept in which we can integrate both responses in the international community, and how this can make a useful for tax administration in order to decrease these illicit financial flows. So the beginning of the research starts in when I observed that there's no like an international agreement about what is tax evasion, and it's a matter that it's basically given to the states that domestically address the matter, and they decide what is the definition of tax evasion into a domestic perspective. However, as the name of tax-related financial flow suggests, we are hitting a problem that is more than one country. It crosses the borders and we go abroad. So when we are having this kind of problem, because the tax-related illicit financial flow, it's understood as an amount that by its source, transfer, or use that cross these borders, it's considered illicit. And therefore, when we are having like a perspective that it's really individualistic and domestic, how can we reach a problem that is international? So we have like this criminal law perspective in which I've observed that we've been using the money laundering offenses as a way to have this response. Also the administrative law through this cooperation and sanction, also the information exchange. And how the joint audits in this case may become a key that is still developing this matter, may develop a key within the administrative response, because they can basically strengthen the cooperation, but also create this functional concept in practical aspect. So why does this topic matter? We only have to see the rates and the numbers in which there have been many institutional so really the international institutions that have tried to imagine, because it's impossible to know it really precise due to the black rate that these crimes normally have. In the UN has estimated that the annual volume of money laundering in the DWP accounts for up to 5% of the total, close to 4 trillion euros. Normally, as we can observe in these statistics, they are measured in billion euros. So as we can see, I wanted to make it more visual. This is the global cost of tax avoidance in billions. However, if we go to the tax evasion, we see that these amounts are increased high. So there are more statistics in this sense. For example, the IMF has estimated approximately that it is 10% and not the 5%. In the case of my country, Spain is the 10th country with the highest tax collection losses in the European Union. And if we try to put all the zeros together, we see that we even have unreadable quantities and amounts of the losses that we are suffering from this phenomenon. Also, how there are many institutions that are also involved and that the anti-money laundering directives are especially addressed for, the case of the banks, for example, and how even the own politicians have admitted to commit these crimes. So the tax-related illicit financial flow is not something that is only for one country, but this is a worldwide problem in which we have still a perspective that is really domestical and personal for every single country. So basically, these are like sum ups of why this topic matters. Basically, because of the revenue and the development of every single country policies, the investment in human rights, the erosion of the equity and trust in public institutions. Also, because when we believe that we are having like a strong tax sovereignty or fiscal sovereignty because we are into protecting tax evasion in our own parameters, actually we are a lack of it. We are losing it because there is something that is missing in front of our nose. So also, we are in a global momentum with the UN last year, especially in the Intergovernmental Committee, started to move the countries in order to create a cooperation framework in this matter, and this really used word in speeches and politicians speaking about how is the importance of tax evasion, but how is it addressed is what I want to understand in this PhD. So what are the issues connected to this tax-related, specifically illicit financial flow? We have three drivers, especially. We have the corruption, in which we have seen that there are examples in which their own countries admit that they have this problem. So we have also criminality, because we are applying in some way the criminal responses to this topic that has like their strong points that are also like mostly is related to when we speak about tax offenses or crimes, is that we take it seriously. You can go to jail. However, it's not being well proportionate, because at the same time we are putting in the eye of the hurricane the taxpayers' rights and the fundamental rights of the citizens. So we're having a problem in how can we involve both. As corruption and criminality have seen that the international community has approached and make an effort to create this framework, there's an evasion legal gap in this case, in which these three drivers, one of them is kind of being cited apart. And it's not like corruption or crime. Evasion lacks a really strong international legal dimension that solves as itself as a framework that is really strong and contemplates the phenomenon as a whole in a strong way. So there's a paradox, because there's been a stronger global coordination against tax avoidance than against evasion, that it's an open violation of the law, whereas the tax avoidance is not the same, because it's inside the legal umbrella. And the problem of this criminal aspect is that what in a country may become a crime, another country, it's not illegal and it's completely legal. So we have a problem of this coordination of criteria. So this have a cross-border impact, in which what I said, the evasion not only harms the country, one country as itself, but it harms beyond the country, the stabilization of the powers, and going across these borders. So we have this historical basis in which the early bilateral cooperation on information exchange, it was really tied to these double taxation issues. However, even though this has been a really important matter, the shift to avoidance is seen, and I give these examples about the BEPS, some of the OECD initiatives about it, and that it's basically focused on this basic erosion and profit system. However, the tax evasion, as I've said, it's been quite aside, and how the criminal law, one of the first and big issues that was the money laundering, and when deciding what to do with the tax evasion, was the decision to consider the tax evasion as a predicate offense of money laundering since 2012. So basically, tax crimes are predicate offenses of money laundering following the directives. The problem is, what is a tax crime? Depending on every single country. So we have this rule applied in different ways depending on the country, in which we don't have like a main line, a main direction, the main path of working. So at the same time, we have some limits that are implicitly in the criminal aspect, which are like the dual criminality and the domestic definitions. Because when we want to ask for help doing these mechanisms of exchange information and tax cooperation, we need to be recognized. What in my country is it's a crime, must be recognized in the other one. So the problem is that if this dual criminality is not applied, then the help that I'm going to be provided is not going to be that useful as in another situation in which this dual criminality principle is applied. So here is what I found one of the main obstacles in which I think that this framework, this convention, must go beyond this idea, in which not because there is no definition in the other states' law, it doesn't mean it's not tax evasion in my country. So maybe we need to go beyond. And at the same time, we have the tax administrative law solution or aspect of this matter, in which we have like the implementation of several directives, European directives, and how the proposal due and following this tax-related illicit financial flow is to create an international convention in cooperation against tax evasion exclusively. So, coming into the proper topic about what is a tax-related illicit financial flow, it starts in 2015, in which it's included into the SDG, and it's the 16.4, in which it says by 2030, significantly reduce illicit financial flows. Tax-related illicit financial flows are included as a subcategory, and these have another momentum of the development of this field, in which we have specifically in 2021 that the UN Factor Panel explicitly includes tax abuse and tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. So we have the classical debate and problem. What is tax evasion? What is tax avoidance? What is tax abuse? And why are we mixing the concept? Well, because there's no a single legal definition as itself. So what tries the UN is to offer a statistics definition. We start trying to quantify the problem, and the first statistics that we have specifically for this type of illicit financial flow are really recent. And also we include this broad approach or narrow approach, in which we include aggressive tax avoidance as detrimental to development, and we have this narrow one in which we limit the illicit financial flow to this illegal conduct. So this opens again the debate: what is evasion, what is avoidance, and at the same time the need to provide a definition properly internationally about what is illicit, what is illegal, what is unlawful, and what is criminal. Why? Because if we know, we also can provide the better solution and the best resources to address the problem. So there's been many initiatives in order to define what is illicit, what is illegal, and in which field must appear a criminal response, and another one, the administrative one. So the preliminary conclusions that I have in the field of tax crimes is that it's really based in bilateralism and fragmentation because of the historical reliance on bilateral treaties. Also that it's really biased because the most sophisticated instrument has been implemented in anti-abuse rules and standards, but there's a weaker international tool for tax evasion particularly, and there is a risk that we have a lopsided system that deters avoidance, but leave evasion just a relatively addressed topic. So the divergent definitions is basically what we've been saying. It's like we haven't only domestical approaches to what is a tax crime. So if we go to the directive and it is considered that a tax crime is a crime that is can be considered as a source of money laundering, it's going to depend a lot on what a tax crime is considered. So if there is no tax crime, there is no money laundering. And we do agree a lot what is money laundering, but we do not agree at all about what is tax evasion. So it's not congruent because there is a part of the line that it's broken. So the using of the AML to fight evasion, it's helpful in order to recover the assets. However, the consequences for the human rights and the procedure guarantees, especially the crime procedure guarantees, depending on the countries. In the case of Spain, it's really worrying because it only serves to over-punish some actions in which they can be relatively weak with this approach. So this needs a revision. And also what we've been addressing about, that is the right frictions between the balance of anti-money laundering and the tax enforcement. So according to the other part, which is the administrative response, the tax administrative responses, I found that the joint audits may be a good opportunity in order to address this topic, in order to have a solution that is more practical and comes from the tax administration, in which basically these are the organisms that know everything about a taxpayer and the main subjects that are applying the exchange information treaties and conventions. So we have this background in which it is supposed to have an end of the band secrecy and the OECD CRs and the automatic exchange information, and also the fight that has been addressed by the European Union against tax havens and the promotion of transparency. However, this in this matter it needs to be addressed properly to have a solution for this issue specifically. So we need to provide this solution in another way. And due to the EU level, we have this implementation of the Article 12b, 12a, in which the joint audits that differ completely from the simultaneous audits are included. So what did Spain? Spain introduces in its legislation to the Article 177 Kingies, only one article, to develop such a main procedure that affects the taxpayers' rights, in which not the directive and the domestic law does not allow the taxpayer to ask for a joint audit. Only the tax administration is allowed to start the procedure. So it allows two or more tax administration to investigate at the same taxpayer in a coordinated way, in which they reach a report that is common. The problem is that this report has not binding effects. So that means that if in a part of this procedure, one tax administration decides that she's not into it anymore, because it depends on the will of the every inspector of the tax administration. And if you motivate it, because the case of the Spanish law says that you must motivate this agreement, you can skip the agreement. So this Biden effect actually is like what is called wet paper. That means basically I have good intentions, but I'm not really into making it happen, which is really worrying, because if we want to address it as a proper tax administration procedure, we need to take more risk. I understand that we are at the beginning of the creation of this joint audit, so it's true that this is the beginning, but for the future, we should have more commitment in this topic. So also this directive have these national divergences, because there is not the same rate of implementation and the same scale of implementation depending on the country. This is the case of the Spanish transposition in this case. And also there are many questions that are remained open, because as I said, for example, there isn't any right to request a joint audit. So the taxpayer is only a passive, acquires a passive role in which it's only the subject that is being investigated, but he cannot make any action in these joint audits. So there is some unclear guarantees for appeals. When does, for example, the Spanish guarantees are going to appear in the attraction, for example, the France guarantee, if there are a joint audit that involves its two tax administrations. So we have many questions that are still open, and it's not defined by directive, not even the domestic law. So this in the field of sovereignty concerns, because basically they have an instrument that is really powerful, that depending on how it's orientated, it can be a solution or another headache for the legislator and the states. So the joint audits are this advanced form of cooperation, but they are still fragile and they need more implementation of rights, especially to define them, and also if there are only one procedure or not, and it only not affect the report, but we go beyond. So the current EU framework, to me, is a declaration of intent more than an effective tool in the state that it's nowadays, at least. So what it would be required, at least that's what I am trying to keep doing in this research. We need a stronger standardization at UN level. We need a codification of taxpayers' rights in cross-border audits, and a greater trust and coordination among states, not only because the dual criminality in the case of when we are fighting for the tax crimes, but also having like the standard about what to define as a really tax evasion action, or if no, we do not want to call tax evasion, the consequences speaks by themselves. So the keys that I've been instructing for this research is that the illicit financial flow are fiscal, legal, and human rights issue, not only a technical tax revenue and collection revenue problem. We need clarity of concepts in order to step out this matter. Not only evasion versus avoidance, but also to define the illicit, the illegal, the lawful, and the crime, in order to apply the better tools and the best tools possible to address the problem, depending on the situation. That the current framework in tax evasion is fragmented, while there are other aspects that are really united and they have like consensus about. This is an example of money laundering. If we couldn't reach an agreement of money laundering, I think that we can make also another one in tax evasion. And how a fair multilateral convention can strengthen the fiscal sovereignty, that is like the main worrying that have the countries, in order that they do not want to lose this sovereignty. So the following steps at the research would be trying how to integrate this package of coordinate tax, criminal, and the anti-money laundering instruments, plus its administrative instruments, joint audits, and exploring more the exact information. the concept of this international convention that is wanted and is really desired by the United Nations, and how we can make it happen while we are saving the rights of the taxpayers and the proportionality that it's, to me, like the base of every single procedure involving the administration or the criminal side. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Raquel, for your excellent presentation. It's a really interesting, difficult and controversial topic. So now we'll give the floor to Professor Traverse to make comments or ask the questions that he considers appropriate.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you to Alfredo and the University of Valencia for hosting the PhD session of the Global Tax Symposium, and thank you to Raquel for her presentation. It is without any doubt a topic that deserves research, that deserves also to be addressed in the way Raquel did with both the international and the European framework. It's at the same time is a very complex topic because first I'll go to the roots, I think, of the problem, and then I will ask Raquel a number of questions to hear her thoughts about it. The roots of the problem, I think, is the fact that we went too fast, too far in the 70s and the 80s of the past century or millennium by liberalizing capital flows without any type of safeguards. And we certainly, and it's very clear if you look at the EU treaty, we decided to give to economic actors an almost unlimited freedom to move capital from one country to the other, not only to one EU country to another other EU country, but also with third countries. And then we realized that actually money would flow from one country to the other, not just for sound economic reasons, but also because it was used to finance terrorism, drug-related crimes, or tax evasion. But it was too late. And then we came with like instruments like reporting obligations and others, because we couldn't go back by limiting capital flows, by simply saying, why would you move billions of dollars or euros from Spain to the Cayman Islands for legitimate reasons? We simply denied it. Or it was also an issue of leaving the financial sector completely free, also to establish banks and subsidiaries in places where there was no apparent economic activity. So I think that's the main, this historical background is important. Like, it's not that you have illicit financial flows by a law of nature. It's a conscious legal construct or deconstruct the fact that now we have free movement of capital and therefore the freedom to move money from very quickly to one part of the world to the other. And therefore what has been done from a legal perspective has to be considered as such. And I think it's important to mention that in research, why the causes of the fact that we cannot control anymore what we have contributed to create. So that was the introduction. Then I have a number of points on which I'd like to hear Raquel. Well, if you look at how international, European, domestic legislation on financial flows has evolved, don't you think that it would be useful to distinguish the nature of the obligations that have been imposed over time on the beneficiaries of those flows? Don't you think that the fact that you have on the one hand like reporting obligation, on the other hand inclusion under international pressure in the domestic system of specific money laundering crimes or tax-related crimes with specific penalties, or with consequences that could be the payment of additional taxes? Don't you think that it would be useful in the research to distinguish between the various consequences for the beneficiaries of those international and European rules? Maybe you can answer directly.
Yeah, thank you. First, I would like to really say thank you for your comments, because yes, I think that it's really useful to distinguish the consequences and also the nature of these different obligations, because to me what it's been an obstacle. It's how to define when you are implementing the tax crimes, how to define the line in which tax administration are, purely which tools or instruments or measures are only tax administration related to obligations in the tax related, and also that the consequences in the tax crimes and how these are involved, how to find the line. To me, it's really difficult sometimes, because I know that there are some measures that are being applied in order to have consequences also in the tax crime field that go beyond not only you have may create a new instrument for example, reporting information for tax administration, but also this has consequences in the tax crime directly, because you are dissuading the criminals, that commit this tax evasion. So it's to me it's have more than one perspective and more than one consequence. So it will be really useful. And I started by the tax crimes because I thought it was easier to go to the consequence at the first time, and then starting back to the reasons why it was a good idea to implement a tax crime in something that is purely based on taxation. So to me, it's like taxation is the material aspect, while the substance of it, and the crimes are, the tax crime are just the name we want to refer to some consequences or some measures, or for example, how the prosecutor's office comes into the equation, in which this tax administration procedure purely at a first step, and then how it can reach the criminal aspect. So I think that that's the reason why I do agree with you in which it will be really useful in order to know where are we in every single step of the path until reaching out these flows and recovering the assets. Because the main reason we are worried, I think, is because we want to recover the assets, because when it leaves our jurisdiction, we depend on and we rely on the others to help. So me as a domestically, I sometimes can do nothing more than request this information exchange. And it's really frustrating in some aspects, because we also want to, that's what I appreciate, of course, maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes we want to maintain like a concept of fiscal sovereignty that it's not possible anymore because of the globalization and the non-borders that we have nowadays, or at least looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's true that when it comes to the interaction between taxation and criminal law, you have to put two words together that do not necessarily match, whether on the international but also at the domestic level. Well, when you talk about administrative cooperation in the area of, for example, transparency and reporting of financial flows, there is also the issue that it's not possible to distinguish a priori between illegal, illicit, or legal financial flows, actually, because if you ask, for example, taxpayers or banks or economic actors to report those flows, you cannot make a distinction. You cannot say, well, you have to report only financial flows that are illegal or illicit, even if you give a definition, or abusive, which was, there is some legislation imposing reporting abusive transactions, but it does not work very well. So if you decide to research on administrative cooperation as regard prevention of money laundering or tax crimes in the form of reporting obligation, well, you will never be able, I think, to discuss the distinction between legal and illegal. Because even if it is the reason why those reporting obligations have been put in place, in their applications, since we are dealing with prevention, we cannot know what the outcome will be, whether they will be considered, those financial flows, as legal or illegal or illicit. So that was a remark. I think it's important that you try either you address that in different parts of your research, or you decide to skip like the preventive part of the repressive and focus on the repressive part. But I think it's quite complicated if you deal with prevention and reporting at the same time to deal with the distinction between legal and illegal, which is mostly about sanctions, which is at the end of the process. But I don't know if you see, do you see my point?
Yeah, completely. I do agree with you that at first sight, when there is going to be any kind of intervention, it's impossible to say. That's the reason why the term illicit is chosen by the UN, I think, because everything comes inside. So we want to be wide interpretation of the tax-related illicit financial flow, because we know we are a problem. So if we choose the illicit term, it comes inside. That's why the money laundering, there is no need the final judgment of a tribunal or judges to be possible to investigate for money laundering. That's the reason why it has changed, and there's no need, just only criminal activities, not even crimes. Criminal activities are enough. So when we choose the illicit, I think this is going by this direction, but as you have said, it's impossible to know at the beginning. So that's the reason why I think we need to have more a practical approach, and that's the reason why I decided not only to focus on the tax crimes, but also go into the tax administration action, because I think it's there in which we can have more intervention than only deciding if we have illicit, that we have illegal, that we have unlawful. At the end of the day, it will be the same, because every single country will interpret what is illicit, what is illegal. So I think that I need to move on from this. Yes, completely.
But you can also simply take the traditional distinction that criminal lawyers use when they deal with anti-money laundering legislation, preventive against repressive instruments, and so that you can try to analyze what are the tax consequences of both types of instruments. I had another point. Like you mentioned, a number of EU rules. It would be interesting from, let's say, really at that point, it's administrative and even criminal cooperation. If the role of the European Public Prosecutor Office could be strengthened, because they have an overall competence as regards crimes, financial crimes, which are EU related. It may include tax crimes like VAT fraud. It may include also money laundering. It may include abuse of funds, EU funds. So that could be a way of strengthening. And they organize sometimes also joint audits, and so it's they use as a coordination, but the criminal audits as a coordination body. So that would be also interesting to analyze existing EU institutions that could have a bigger role in tax crimes and financial crimes. Another point, which is more of an internal law, it's like the relationship between tax offenses and money laundering. And so tax offenses as predicate offenses. The issue is that in many countries, it's not very clear, it's not always clear how far must the underlying predicate tax offense be identified to apply anti-money laundering criminal law. Because sometimes you have to identify it very clearly. So, and be able, for example, to define that the proceeds are in fact the result of a very specific tax offense. I don't know, hiding salaries in another country, salaries paid during that year from that employer. But most of the time, like anti-money laundering offenses work like, there must have been tax evasion, because the money came from that country and that person has not reported money in that country. But we don't know exactly what type of tax offense, but there must be one. The level, the burden of proof, let's say, imposed as regards the predicate offense has a huge impact on the possibility for criminal public prosecutors around the world to use anti-money laundering offenses to fight tax crimes. So it's certainly something that you should probably address, also because there is no real guidance at the EU level in the anti-money laundering directives as in that regard. Something that also has caused a number of lawyers to strongly criticize anti-money laundering offenses because they were too undefined, and there was the issue with the legality, principle of legality and predictability, not so much as regard the definition of the anti-money laundering offense, but the underlying or the predicate offense, the degree of detail that to be used to define that offense. That was a remark. I have a question. You seem to be very convinced that joint audits are a suitable instrument to fight illicit financial flows. What is the type of configuration that you're thinking of? How could joint audits prevent financial flows?
Yeah, I think, they are being recently implemented in Spain. So, it's like I'm in this phase of the PhD in that I'm trying to investigate why they may contribute to tax-related illicit financial flow. I think that it's an opportunity. It's still it's a newborn, so it still needs a development, because how is the configuration nowadays, to me needs more dedication, more action from the legislator in both levels, not only my country but also the European. But I think can be useful, because if we are cooperating with other tax administrations and we discover these illicit financial flows, it could be a solution that comes from the tax administration, in which we do agree, we open the door between both tax administrations that are implied and are affected by these flows, and also due to the consequences of the taxpayer. It doesn't matter if they are tax sanction or a tax crime properly, but to avoid the nebis in idem and how the guarantees. So I only can say I don't know yet. I wish I could answer how it would be a good idea to implement this. I know that there may be an opportunity. Now what I want to know is if it's possible to build it up in order to address the tax-related illicit financial flows. I think it could be possible if we have this binding facts of the report, the common report, and if even though we do not consider the same, when there is a procedure that have the guarantees explicitly concerned and guaranteed, sorry for the reiterative, but if we trust the other countries in which we are cooperating, we can share the information, we can help into the procedure to catch the flows that we are looking for, because and that's the reason why I think it's a good idea to implement the young adults as a tool. Because if we go beyond emphasizing in a criminal aspect, we could understand better the other country, so be more objective in which are the consequences we want to finish, to solve the illicit financial flows? Do we have signs that they exist? Yes, but this is not tax evasion in my country. Yeah, but in mine it is. Okay, so the guarantees are well executed, the taxpayer rights are preserved. Yes, so we share, we participate, we actuate, we are more practical than just theoretical.
But I agree with you. I'm in favor of joint audits. I was just wondering how you could efficiently connect joint audits and fight against illicit financial flows in a very clear way. So I think you should think about it. There might be ways, but it's not that self-evident. I had two last remarks, very short. First, if you talk about financial flows, I think you have to address the issue of virtual currencies somehow, because they do not work the same way as traditional flows, like between financial institutions, recognized, and there is a lot of money. There is a lot of money, a lot of illegal money moving. And therefore, there are specific obligations others starting to be imposed on Bitcoin, for example, holders or institutions holding Bitcoins on behalf of third parties. But it's certainly something that will have an impact on anti-money laundering and tax legislation. And yeah, finally, last point, I think you could use tax to reduce illicit or illegal financial flows. For example, in Belgium, been now for years, there is an obligation for companies paying money or sending money to tax havens to declare them. Otherwise, they won't be deductible from the income tax. And so that's a way where taxation can be used to somehow to at least make those flows more transparent. And it doesn't mean that they're not used afterwards to commit even tax crimes, but at least you know, because the problem that you have at the moment is also those flows are so gigantic, but most of the time you have no idea that they occur because it's in between banks, and banks do not report usually to the state like the amount of money that they're making circulate throughout the world. Or maybe tax obligation may help. Tax incentive somehow. That's a tax incentive to declare. So that was a suggestion. There might be other examples.
Well, thank you both for this interesting academic debate. We are out of time, so arrived to the end of this event. So congratulations, Raquel, for your excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Marco, for the valuable comments. Now I give the floor to Alfredo for the closure.
Thank you. Many thanks. Going to program, I have to end with the closure session. I will be brief because I think we have had very interesting debates during those 2 days. So there is no need, very little to add, but nevertheless, I think first of all, that has been a very enriching experience for, at least for me, and I hope for all the attendants, both online here in person. I think it was a pity that finally we could not manage to take some more people here in Valencia, because I think that well, the personal interaction during the breaks, before and after, especially last year during the dinner, was really very, very exciting, very fruitful. I think knowing people and behind the immediate interest that they show in a presentation makes people more comfortable to interact and to follow this relation, not only as a professional, but also as a personal. And I can make sure that this at least will serve for to enhance and to develop those relations, which from now on will be personal. And second, I think obviously I have to start by saying thank you to all the steering committee and all the members of the Global Tax Symposium for accepting the University of Valencia as a full member of the organization. We knew that there was a real challenge for us to enter, but finally I think that we are convinced that this move was very interesting, was necessary for us. It's a great opportunity to be in the line of one of the most prominent consortia of university dealing with international tax issues. I think that this, what some people may consider the little kit of the symposium, which is the PhD, was very interesting because despite the fact that one may consider this the little kit, not the big senior meeting one, I think that young researchers are more up to date to the topics that are coming as new challenges for international taxation, and therefore the discussions here show clearly that there are a bunch of real researchers that are tackling the issues with very sound methodological approach and very sound knowledge of what they are doing. I simply want to make a disclaimer that there are no people in the room especially for those candidates that submitted their application to be here and to be able to present. I simply have to say pardon for them, because I'm sure that most of them would have come with very interesting projects and for us to learn from their research. But nevertheless, I hope will be recorded. Probably no one will listen, but I hope that in the near future, in the next meeting that we will have, they will see the challenge and they will take the opportunity at least to present or submit their application, and hopefully we will agree and realize that they deserve to be present as well here. And having this, obviously this is the last announcement that I will do at the end. I think that we discussed during the break the whole purpose of the PhD Global Tax Symposium. It derives from the notion of public service that most of us, being professors of a public university, consider that it is part of a task. And this part of our task is to help, or to try to help, hopefully we got it that, students that want to open or to have a kind of another view, another perspective of what they are doing and how they could improve their job. So I think that we as a consortium, especially we as professor at the University of Valencia, if we at certain point we got this outcome, for us it's a great achievement. So thank you for being present here, for allowing us to develop our task. And finally, last but not least, I'm obliged to declare, and for me it's a real honor, despite the fact that she could not manage to come here, otherwise she would have given the floor to announce, but I'm delighted to announce that the next year Global Tax Symposium PhD seminar will move to Africa, and the University of Pretoria will be in charge of the organization of that event. in the hands of Professor Annette Ogutu. So I really have to thank her for her submitting the proposal to be hosting this seminar, which I think that makes it clear the intention of the Global Tax Symposium in its definition. It is meant to be a true global organization, and because only enlarging and being really global, we can better understand what are the real threats for the globe as a whole. And we have seen here in many discussions that those threats exist and how to overcome and how to solve those are a responsibility for us to the possible extent. So with this official statement and an announcement, I certainly declare close this present year's GTS PhD seminar, and hope to see you in the near future with a success in your research career. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfredo. Bye bye.
You, Duan.